Welcome to another episode of this show. The producers won't let me quit, and the producer is I. The producer is I. That's welcome to the show. Merry Christmas. Happy Halloween. Uh, I don't know, Kwanzaa. Let's ask Justin Trudeau what he thinks. Holly, let's ask Justin Trudeau what he thinks. I think that literally every conflict, if I mean, based on the different tones of Justin Trudeau's skin over the course of, I guess, the 90s, he's a great politician. He could solve every political issue from West Africa all the way to probably, I don't know, Bangladesh. Just in skin tones. He could, the Middle East, he kills it. He just lightens up his tone a little bit and he just makes stuff happen. He is a character, that one. That one is truly a character. Truly, truly, truly an oddball person. An interesting man. I'm doing well. Probably better than Justin Trudeau in a sense, but maybe worse. I'm not as notorious. I certainly don't have as many. His podcast would have a much larger following, if only just for the hate. But yeah, it's funny. It's good stuff. I don't know. I don't know what's going on this week in scandals. I haven't paid attention to too many more scandals, so I don't know what's going on. I think there's something going on in the UK about Brexit. Who knows? I have no idea. No clarity on it. Ugh. It's weird. Anyways, I'm here and I'm having a good old time, and I hope you are too. You're about to kick off your weekend. It's about to be Miller time. It's almost Miller time on the East Coast. This Miller time. That was like a really old idea. You know what's funny? Like I don't really see a lot of like the bikini ads of the olden days, the ones I was raised with. I don't know, I'm wondering why they went away. I don't know if it was like backlash or public. I don't know what it was. But it was interesting, like how that stuff just like went away. Maybe they just thought it wasn't a corporate good look anymore. Maybe they worried that they would get boycotted. I don't know, but there used to be tons of those ads, and I don't see them anymore now. Like beer ads are like funny and they're quirky. They're like watching Tim and Eric stuff made by Tim and Eric. It's not. I don't know what it is. It's changed. Sports has changed in itself, but then also the advertising around it has changed in some pretty interesting and neat ways. It is cool, and fun and interesting. Lots of changes in this world. I'm just gonna sound like I'm running for president in the Democratic Party. Just old. Things have changed. Things have changed, I've noted. And I want to talk to you, my fellow Americans, about that. It's really funny, like lines like my fellow Americans used to be like, it's funny how like that line at some point was really touching and then it just became a cliche. And it's like marketing, like you constantly have to keep coming up with new ways of connecting with people to do stuff. It's just weird. It's so interesting. You have to like, you just got to come up with all these like new taglines, new phrases. I mean, maybe you can recycle old ones, but they have to be totally out of the political consciousness for you to recycle them, because people own words. I read this book called The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. You don't have to read the book. There are summaries that are only 9 pages. If you even just read that, it's enough. It covers pretty much everything that's important in the book. But yeah, it's just the idea of like you own a phrase, and then like someone else has to come up with another phrase, and it's never good to imitate your competitors. Like the second place person in something should not attempt to like if you're like in other words like the example they give is like Pepsi shouldn't imitate Coke. Coke is the classic, so that means if Pepsi is the number two, it shouldn't try to also attempt to be classic. It should actually try to define itself, own a different word than the word that Coca-Cola owns, right? So Pepsi is for young people and it's new and it's hip. And actually, apparently, doing that, Pepsi gained market share because they define themselves in opposition. So the number two defines themselves in opposition to the number one and does not try to compete with the number one on number one's terms, um, which is an interesting idea for actually in politics because I think there's a sense in which if you're going to try to out nasty Trump, it ain't going to work. You know, he owns that strategy, he owns that tactic and that brand, and so someone else is going to need to find a different one. Maybe it's about being civil. Maybe it's about portraying Trump as the child and I'm the adult in the room. Um, I don't know what it is, but it's up to the people in their political communication teams to figure that out. But anyways, just read the summary of 22 Immutable Laws Marketing, or friggin' everyone who just email me. Email me at Jack Jack Michelle Michelle 1983 spell 1983 at gmail.com, and I will just email you the summary of the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. And it's good. Yeah, just read it because like it takes about it's sort of dense, so it'll probably take you I don't know, maybe 30 minutes max to read it, and you're gonna learn a lot from it. Like I literally just reading that, and then I listened to the audiobook, and I was like, the audiobook didn't add too much more, but the points came through. And I mean, obviously they hype them up as laws. They aren't laws. They're more like guidelines, rules of thumb, but they're pretty clever. And I get why marketing is so important. As much as I used to disregard it or say it was crap or poo-poo it, it's great. It's fascinating, super super interesting. So, anyways, what are some of the other ideas in it? Yeah, that you have to own a word. Whoever owns the word in the category, you can't take that word from them. Products are a battle of perceptions, not actual product qualities, which is definitely illustrated in politics. Um, it's a battle of perceptions. If you're in second place, define yourself, own a different word, and usually own a word in opposition to the number one. If you're in third place or below, and then the idea is if you can define yourself in opposition, then the number one brand owns 50%. You own the other 50% or the other whatever, the everything else, and that blocks out 3 through 7 in an industry, which is just a friggin' great insight. And then if you're 3 through 7 in the industry, what you've got to do is probably try to find a niche that's either geographic or with a certain consumer population, and you just got to stay in that niche, and then try to see if you can jump up. And one of the great points is you really can't jump unless the only way you can't actually jump your competition when it comes to marketing. Usually your competition can make some kind of mistake and then you capitalize on it. But like you can't, like if there's a number one and you're the number two, you can't just take their position by competing with them heads up. Usually they make some kind of mistake, and that mistake can be like, I guess, not serving a certain market, disregarding certain kinds of technologies, whatever, and then you displace them. But everyone has to wait for someone else to make a mistake so they can jump up. And there's nothing else you can do other than that. So I don't know. It's just a lot of interesting ideas and just fun stuff. I don't know. It's just good times. Good times. Good times. And yeah, I don't know. I dig it, and just so many fun ideas. What are some of the other ones? You need money to ramp up your your like awareness of your brand. Um, God, what are some of the other ones? There's just so many good ones. Uh, let's see. Yeah, just so many things that you have to. There's the danger of line extensions, which is an interesting one. I don't know. Some of them are a little more like nuanced. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just think it's if you care about politics or like political communication, it's like I realize it's just an extension of marketing. Frankly, it's and I get it. Like I get why it's not just a person talking in front of a microphone now. It's like there's an art to this. Part art, part science. Certainly, I mean, I guess with marketing, it's subject to A/B testing like anything else. Yeah, just really really cool. Um, I think I might have mentioned that I've been watching The Unit because I just can't stop talking about it. I love the show. It's so much fun. This will be another short episode, by the way. I'm just gonna get to some other stuff. Um, but yeah, I love the show The Unit. It's so much fun. I have a mentor who himself was in. He doesn't really talk about it, but I can get the sense that he was in the special forces, and he just basically is like all that stuff on TV. That's representation. Is just like goofy and it's inaccurate. I mean, maybe there are parts that are accurate, but like a lot of it is just not. He was telling me actually some stories earlier today, and I was just like, wow, that's fascinating. Like how you think about the world because of what you did professionally. And that's just, I don't know, man. Always interesting stuff. Always interesting. And yeah, I mean, what can I say? I think it's interesting that we're like in this weird battle as human beings between, on one hand, I mean, I don't. This is an oversimplification. I'm not a biologist, but I just think it's interesting that uh, we both want to be correct, but we also want to be the pack leader, or we want to follow a pack leader. And so a pack leader usually exhibits, traits maybe like dominance, confidence, security, assuredness, and those things in some cases are great for leading people, like having a vision, that kind of thing. But they're very bad for for sometimes decision making and actually thinking stuff through. Um, and it's not like a clear, bright line, but just realizing that there's a difference between those. The idea that what makes you trust someone may mean that they're trustworthy to you, but they aren't necessarily effective. Which means they're trustworthy, and how those things are different. There's a distinction between that and people, and that leads to a lot of I want to say frankly like human suffering, or mistakenness, disappointment. Uh, I always like saying disappointment because it includes the word ointment, or it probably doesn't. I don't know. Wait, disappointment? Yes, it does include the word ointment. That's a fun one. You can't get disappointment without ointment. That is a good line for any kind of cream. Um, my friend, as an aside, a friend of mine showed me that instead of getting like this really expensive Kiehl's lip balm cream, what you can do is you get baby diaper rash, um, like cream, and you put it on your lips, and it's like half the price, and it's the exact same ingredients. And just make sure you get a baby diaper rash thing that's like edible, which most of them are because we're talking with babies here. You know what I mean? You gotta be safe, son. Gotta take care of them kids. So yeah, just as an aside. I forget what I was talking about. Um, Kiehl's cream, babies, branding. God, I lost my train of thought. This is what happens when you decide to fast for, I don't know, maybe I'm gonna fast for like 16 hours. I just have been in like a loop energy wise, and now I'm fasting, and I can actually feel like it's weird. I feel like energized in a strange way. I used to periodically just like skip meals, and I thought that that was a bad thing, but now I realize I think it maybe might have been the source of a lot of the energy I had because I've been eating too consistently now. So I just need to switch it up. Not necessarily a ton, but maybe like periodically just go without eating for like 12 hours. You know, um, so yeah. Well, I forget. I don't even. What is this show? Um, I was talking about political communication and military. Oh, yeah, the distinction between like what makes someone a good leader, and then my brother, mentioned something to me, and I guess it was a quote from Jeff Bezos, and it was the idea that like in part good leadership is actually making the correct decision and identifying the correct option. That's got to be a key part of leadership, right? The ability to admit when you're wrong has to be a big part of leadership. Um, and it's an interesting one. It's interesting because in the context of talking with my buddy slash mentor about this stuff, his point was no, like you can't, like with some things you just have to trust people. You have to trust that they will not ask themselves questions like, "Are is what we do, or are we doing the right thing?" or things like that. Like you just need to, in certain contexts, like for example, I guess combat, like you would have to just be like, "No, I just trust this person." Like I might not even like this person, right? Like I actually might hate this dude, but I trust him. I am confident that if I give him an assignment, he will handle it until he's dead. Like if he stops handling it, it's going to be because he's incapacitated in some way. It won't be anything else. And I also trust that there's a very low likelihood of him being incapacitated, or even if he gets shot, he won't, like he'll perform to the best of his ability. He won't run, he won't break, he won't panic or any of that stuff. And I was like, wow, that is. But at the same time, he was being philosophical about it. I was like, but does it necessarily produce good outcomes or good cultures? Is it good, for people? Does it have exhibit biases? Absolutely. And he was willing to say. Now he's out of it, of course. So I think he's willing to say that. And I don't mean that to disparage him. I understand that. Based on what he was telling me, I was like, oh, if you're in that space, yeah, you can't afford to like think about some of those things. That's for someone who's like been in the game and I guess left the game, which is his situation, not like someone who's still in it because they can't maybe afford to think about those kinds of questions. They've got to think about survival first, and then other things later. So yeah, I don't know. I just think it's just like really, it's interesting. He basically was saying he's like it's got to be this way because I have to be able to trust people that none of us are going to break, that we're all committed to this project, right? But on the same level, he's also saying I'm not sure that those mechanisms that breed trust necessarily lead to overall well-being of the armed forces or whether it's the right way to train people. But he was also agnostic. He wasn't saying like, oh, the other people who are saying the military needs to change is right. He was just saying, I don't know. I just know that, right, like, basically the needs of like warrior culture have necessitated these ways of thinking and these ways of have evolved into these ways of relating and these ways of being with people. And they just, you know what I mean? They just compound because the culture becomes more and more insular. But I don't know if that's good. I don't know if there's a better way to do it. But it's just an interesting opening for a conversation. And I wasn't, prone to pounce in and tell him, they should do X, Y, and Z. I was just like, this is interesting. I don't know the answer, but it's fascinating, right? And it's just interesting when you think about those questions without necessarily an agenda, but just like curiosity. And isn't that what this show is about? But yeah, I mean, you see the same thing in business communities, right? There's the idea of like the alpha male, let's be honest, alpha male business person, and a lot of times they can lead to terrible decisions. And like they're like the wolf leader is great when all you do is hunt elk, right? And you guys are a bunch of wolves, and you have a pack leader, and it goes and kills elks, and elks pretty much are always the same way. In fact, we have evolved as wolves to deal with like killing these creatures, right? Like wolves, and I mean like elk and deer, and hunt and stuff like that. Like literally, what we select for as a pack leader is, like is almost built presumably like on some level of evolution to like hunting these animals. But like now have that pack leader, I don't know, like make a friggin' iPhone. Right? Or have that pack leader make anything. And it's like, what? Like maybe they're not really that great at this. So I think about that, like with companies. All right, because you see these business leaders who are like super alpha, super competitive, and I'm not necessarily sure they lead to a bunch of good outcomes. They can oftentimes like overexpand or be overconfident, or buy things that don't really make sense. And also, they run it like a pack. They don't run it like a committee where there's input and they're the final decision maker. They sort of like everyone's got to advance on telling people what they want to hear. And so politics are inescapable from certain kinds of situations. You could say that there's a politics of these military units that he's talking about. There's a politics to an office, and it doesn't necessarily always produce good outcomes, but it does reflect the agency and the goals of each player in the system. So I don't know, just really really interesting stuff. Like I don't have any answers. I'm just throwing this stuff out because my brain runs through it. I'm reading Anti-Fragile. I'm telling everyone to read it because I think it might be one of the most interesting books I've ever read. Other than like Sapiens, like last year Sapiens blew my mind, or maybe that was the beginning of this year. And this year it's like Anti-Fragile. Like the ideas in it are just lights out. They're insane. It makes like it just makes life make a lot more sense. I'm gonna be totally freaking honest. It makes a lot of things in life much more explicable than they were before I listened to this book. Every chapter puts in a new keystone that makes me go, oh, wow, I guess I didn't see it that way. Let me see if that's true in life. That's how I felt when I was listening to Sapiens. I was just like, this anecdote, actually, I've seen it in my own life, which is, and and then maybe you try to test the contra positive and the counterfactual, and try to see if you can negate this point. Because in other words, don't be seduced by the anecdote, but apply it in your own life and see how it works. That's like my new way of engaging with a lot of material. And usually it means also that my ability to criticize something is not as robust when I just accept the anecdote or the example that's been given to me. I should actually try to choose my own anecdote in that I've observed and apply whatever principles or tactics or technique that's demonstrated in this anecdote and put it on my anecdote and see if it makes sense. That's the test of whether a book is good to me. That's what I did as I read 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. I wasn't just like, this is all right. It's just like, does this check out? Do I see this in other domains outside of marketing, outside of corporations even? Outside of the first degree of test is, their anecdote. Then I can go to an anecdote in the same, in business with marketing. Then I can go to something like politics. Then I can go to something like people and social relationships. And, the further I get away from the anecdote they choose, I feel like I gain more confidence in the message behind the anecdote. If I can get further away from the subject matter, time, and place of that anecdote, and the rule or the principle still works, then booyah, that's great. I don't know if I can prove things, but I can certainly negate things and say, I don't know if that makes sense. Interestingly, one of the funner things in the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing that they talked about was the idea that the authors were criticizing Microsoft for trying to get this. The book was published in the early 90s, and they were criticizing Microsoft for trying to get into the spreadsheet business and word processing business, because two other companies were already dominant in those spaces, and they were saying it's a little bit foolish for Microsoft to extend its product line, right? In other words, like they're calling it Microsoft Word, they're calling it Microsoft Excel, and they're creating Microsoft Office. They're bundling it as a suite instead of having individual products. Um, and and yeah, I mean, like, obviously, the authors of 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing were entirely wrong in that case. Freaking, Microsoft Office ended up being one of the most. No one remembers what Lotus is. You gotta be, if you're over the age of 34, you might know Lotus 123, but otherwise, you don't. You don't know jack about Lotus 123. Microsoft just murdered it and took its place and impersonated it. So in any case, yeah, that's basically that was like a thing where I was like, I don't know if that line extension rule is so good, and why it doesn't work. There's another example in the Innovator's Dilemma. This Harvard Business School professor basically makes this point of saying he thinks that the iPhone won't do well because they're extending their product line and they're innovating in a way. They're already an established company and they're trying to adopt a disruptive technology, and they've just played their hand, and people won't go for such an expensive low margin product, which is how Clayton Christensen defines disruptive technologies. And I was just like, oh yeah, he's wrong about that one, right? Like history proved him wrong. Not to say that like he isn't right in so many ways, like um, but there are even limits to models. Even the best academic, even the best thinkers who build a model, it's like there's still, it doesn't extend everywhere. So I don't know. Cool stuff. Have fun. I've talked about some stuff. Um, yeah, man, it's your life. But seriously, hit me up for that book if you want it, or the summary, I should say. So you don't really need to read the book. But or you may want to read the book, but why not read the summary first to see if it's worth your time, and then you can get through the book quicker. So I'm sort of into book summaries now. Anyways, I've got like a stack of them to read. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great week and enjoy the weekend. Peace.